I know that the Republican Party has historically been able to insult and do damage to their base, and their base still supports them. But you absolutely need to listen to this audio of Robert Kennedy Jr. outright just demolishing and devastating and insulting MAGA, calling them outright Nazis, belligerent idiots, cowards, and bootlickers. And don't get me wrong, I don't expect that this is going to change or move the dial on anything. Robert Kennedy Jr. will still likely remain the Director of Health and Human Services. That's because MAGA has gotten accustomed to taking any insult thrown their way so long as it's okay with Donald Trump. Donald Trump has already insulted MAGA, saying that he loves the poorly educated. And now here his pick for the Department of Health and Human Services is insulting them at a level that really should tick them off. But because they have a spirit of submission to anything Donald Trump says, so long as Donald Trump is okay with what Robert Kennedy Jr. says in this clip you're getting ready to listen to, well, MAGA will just roll over and take it because that's what they're accustomed to doing, because that's who they are. As Robert Kennedy Jr. says in this clip, they're cowards and bootlickers. Take a listen.
You know, one of the things that you write so beautifully, and your stuff is so fun to read, but you write about Trump. Quote, the way that you build a truly vicious nationalist movement is to wed a relatively small core of belligerent idiots to a much larger group of opportunists and spineless fellow travelers whose primary function is to turn a blind eye to things. We may not have that many outright Nazis in America, but we have plenty of cowards and bootlickers, and once those fleshy dominoes start tumbling into the Trump camp, the game is up. When you talk about fleshy dominoes, Chris Christie comes to mind.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, to be sure, I want to make something clear. MAGA does have a central focus. They don't have a core overriding purpose other than to cause harm. Their sole focus, though, is the execution of this harm. And if that means that they have to put up with someone who insulted them the way Robert Kennedy Jr. did, then they'll absolutely do that. I don't think for a second that this is going to move the dial for anyone on the Republican side of the equation. MAGA is not going to be fazed by this one bit because they've been insulted every single year for the last 10 years of knowing Donald Trump. The Republican Party has always had a certain level of disdain for their workers, for the working class in their party, for evangelicals in their party. They historically have had a level of disrespect and contempt for the very people who put them in power, which is not just evidenced by the words that they say, but by the policies that they execute, right? We're talking about people with pre-existing conditions who voted to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. So I don't really think that this clip is going to shake up the Republican Party or Donald Trump. I don't think Donald Trump is going to get rid of Robert Kennedy Jr. unless MAGA actually comes to their senses and says, we don't need someone in power who thinks this way about our movement. Don't get me wrong. What Robert Kennedy Jr. said in this clip is absolutely accurate, right? This is one of the few things that he's correct on. His anti-vax and anti-science policies is completely and totally false and wrong and detrimental. But he clearly identified very, very precisely the nature of what MAGA is in this country. And so he's speaking the truth, but I don't think the truth is going to faze MAGA because they have a primary goal, and that is to cause harm. Robert Kennedy Jr.'s anti-vax and anti-science policies will cause the greatest harm in this country. It will bring back diseases that we've gotten rid of, like polio. It will not make America healthy again. It will make America sick more than we've ever been in the history of our country. And that is the primary goal of MAGA. And the interesting thing about it is that you can see this outright submission, this outright subservience that regular rank and file members of MAGA have. Like, they literally have voted to destroy their own lives. Some of them depend on Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid. They just elected the party who is executing a plan to get rid of it or to strip it down so much that their benefits go basically to zero. And so we're dealing with a group of people who are so enamored with the personality of Donald Trump that they'll let Donald Trump do anything he wants to do to them. And so if that means, number one, putting Robert Kennedy Jr. in position when he has clearly a level of disdain and disgust for MAGA, then they'll go along with it. They love the insults. They embrace it. They revel in it. For whatever reason, they really genuinely enjoy it. And likewise, if Robert Kennedy Jr. gets into a position of power and he begins to execute policies that causes their life harm, they embrace it. They love it. They absolutely embrace the harm that is being done to them by the people that lord and rule over them. So I don't, this clip is a great clip. I think it's hilarious. I think that it really shows that Robert Kennedy Jr. knows the devils that he's working with. But what does that say about Kennedy, right? It says a lot about MAGA, but it also says something about Robert Kennedy Jr., that he believes that this entity, MAGA, and the Republican Party and the conservative movement in this country, he believes these things about them, but now he aligns with them and he serves at the pleasure of their leader. In another clip, he called Donald Trump racist. He doesn't care about that. He wants power. Robert Kennedy is no better than the very people that he's insulting in this clip, because as much as they want power so that MAGA can do harm, Robert Kennedy Jr. wants the same amount of power so that he can execute that harm. And if that means that he has to work with outright Nazis, then so be it. If that means that he has to align now with bootlickers, if that means that he himself has to become a bootlicker, then so be it. And if that means that he has to be a belligerent idiot, then so be it. Because just like MAGA, he has a singular focus, and that is, how can he destroy the public health of the United States of America for whatever reason motivates him? I personally think that it's tied into the fact that his father was by Sirhan Sirhan. I think that he has had a grudge against the United States of America ever since. And so now this 70-year-old man who was emotionally traumatized as a child is carrying out his personal retribution against the United States of America by destroying our public health system. And if that means he has to align with Nazis, then so be it. If that means that he has to align with belligerent idiots, then so be it. If that means that he has to bend the knee to someone he already called a racist and a moron, then so be it. Whatever Kennedy has to do to execute his own personal vendetta against the United States of America, he's willing to do. And we're seeing that play itself out right now. God have mercy on the United States of America.